Hola mi gente, welcome to the Money Chisme podcast, where we spill the real chisme on building wealth without the bullshit. Whether you're trying to invest, grow that side hustle, finally get your money right, or my favorite, buy rental properties, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Violeta, a first-gen Mexican immigrant, real estate investor, entrepreneur, and your financial hype woman. Get ready for tips, tricks, and expert advice straight from nuestra comunidad, porque el dinero es power and we're here to claim it. Don't forget, you can always find helpful resources down in the show notes and in descriptions, so make sure you check that out. Having an emergency fund has recently saved my behind because I had three things recently happen to me, and I am so thankful that I had an emergency fund. Now, this isn't the first time we talk about having an emergency fund and why you need an emergency fund. But I feel that a veces we don't hear of the stories of when we actually use those funds, right? Because they're there for emergencies. Y a veces we get into this mindset where we think it is a savings account and it's not. We tend to resist when something does come up that we don't use those funds. I know I've been guilty of it and I'm like, no, I don't want to touch those funds. I'll just do without. But that's the point of an emergency fund, is to use them. So I want to share three ways that I recently used these funds for three different types of emergencies. But before we get into my story, I want to just kind of like quickly do a recap of what an emergency fund is and the different kind of types that you can have. And, I know we talk about it and you'll see it, but really, emergency fund is basically in the name, right? It's for your emergency, but you have several different types. Like you could have one for in case you got laid off or they cut back your hours or whatever. So that's more of an emergency fund for living expenses. Like maybe you want to have a few months worth of your mortgage payments and your big bills and, like your car payments and stuff like that. Maybe you want to save up an emergency fund for that in case something happens. And the recommendation varies. It used to be 3 to 6 months, but with everything going on with the job market and the layoffs happening and everything going freaking crazy, you're looking at more like a year of saving up. And then you have another fund for like smaller emergencies, but still, emergencies like, se te ponchó una llanta and you have to, replace a tire and, or you had some plumbing issues at the tapo, the toilet or whatever, right? Things like that. And those are the ones that I'm kind of talking about right now, with what I had to deal with. Now, where do you want to keep your funds? Well, you want to not have them in a regular savings account at a bank. You want to have a high yield savings account because the bank, te va a dar like, 1% or less around there. And so you're not even keeping up with inflation. And with the high yield savings account, it gives you, I mean, it's in the name, right? It gives you a higher yield. And, most of them keep up with inflation, right? And there's so many out there. The one that I use is Upgrade. I am going to link it down below. It is an affiliate link, but we both get the kickback on it. I think it's, I haven't looked lately, but usually it's like up towards $200, depending how much you put in there, right? But we both get the benefit. But I'll put that down there right now as of this recording of Tuesday, September 23rd, because I got to put it out there because I don't want you to come at me saying, okay, it was at this percent. But right now it is at 3.42% because remember, interest did go down. So it brought down the high yield savings account. And it's pretty simple. easy to use. I like it, but there's so many out there. Check your credit cards. For example, Amex also has one, and I don't know if I have an affiliate for that, but I'll post it down there too if I have one. But if not, check your cards and things like that to see which one is the best for you. The point is to move your emergency fund from a regular bank to a high yield savings account. I did that with my mom, and it was such a struggle because our community is very, has a lot of financial anxiety, and they like things that are for sure, like banks. um and I moved her to upgrade, and I think she's already this year earned over like $1,000 in the interest from just having her account there. So that's the reason why I say it's better to have it in a high yield savings account, because she was barely getting anything at the bank. But anyways, let me get back to my story of the three ways that I used emergency funds recently. It was like back to back to back, it felt like. And the first one was, if you're not familiar or don't know, I have been living in an RV, because the house that is on the land is not ready to be moved in. The house is there now. I have a manufactured home on the land. The problem is que no tiene utilities, so I can't move into it yet. So we had bought an RV and we were living in it because we're like, okay, it's probably a month or two before we can move into it. Well, it's September now. We bought that in June, and like todavía we haven't been able to move into it. And with um with my daughter and everything, and like just the chaos and everything like that, we were like, you know what, we're just gonna like put the RV on the land. We built a parking pad for it on the land, and we're like, all right, let's just go move it over there, and then we're gonna just go stay at my parents' house, which is where I'm at now. And you can hear my daughter in the background, and probably, and it's the we're just gonna wait out here until the house is done. And but when it was time to go move the RV, we noticed that the tires were like almost shredded. Like, it wasn't going to be safe to move that RV. Like, por un milagro, we freaking made it to there, because between California to Texas, like it just wore out those tires really bad. So we needed to replace them, and that was like $800 that we did not plan for, that we did not expect. But luckily, we had, again, that emergency fund that we had been putting funds into throughout the past year or so. And we're like, all right, good. We could use that. And next day, vinieron, they replaced the tires, and we moved it to the land. And now we're over here at my parents'. Now, I am a real estate investor, and I own three duplexes over there, out of state, in another state. And me tocó la suerte that this area, the area where I have my three duplexes, there was a 1,000-year flood. Um, this was back in August, and they had a lot of rain. I think it was like 3 days of just nonstop rain, of just like heavy rain. And it caused some flooding. And it's crazy because I didn't wasn't even paying attention until I got the email and of notifying the owners, from my property manager, notifying the owners that there was, 1,000-year flood or whatever, and that I had a property that had some flooding. And I have, my duplexes are built to where they have a basement, and then you have the first unit, and then the second unit is on top of that unit. So upstairs going up and everything like that. And to in order to pump out the water and just do cleanup, and I think one of the basement windows broke because of the water coming in, I think. Um that was me costó upwards to like $2,000. And uh and the fortunate thing was that my insurance was not going to cover it, which is so annoying because the reason they said was because it did not happen in the four walls of the house. I don't know. It was so weird. But it was because the flooding was actually not from the flooding itself. It was just because the sewer system was so there was so much flooding and everything, so it got overflowed. And so it came into the basement. Now, from the pictures, I think I lucked out a little bit because from the pictures, it showed that it wasn't too bad. There was definitely standing water. There was like water, I would say maybe an inch, but not a lot to where it messed up a lot of the appliances and stuff. Like, my tenants down there in the basement, they have their laundry room, so they have their washer and dryer. The water heaters are down there, the furnaces are down there. So like it would have been bad if it would have like flooded everything. I think it did kind of short circuit one of the water heaters. I had to I saw that they replaced like a pilot or something like that. I forgot what it was, but they did have to replace something because it kind of like short circuited or something. But there is I think it's called a sump pump in the basement that is for that. It's like if a little bit of flooding happens, it like goes into the sewer system or whatever. But because it just, it was just a lot from all the flooding. It just kind of like backflowed into um that basement. And so the property manager, which I'm so thankful that they were on top of everything. Like they were immediate response. They got fans, they got pumps to take out the water and clean up and everything was taken care of pretty fast for my tenants. But all that, it cost me about $2,000 around there, maybe a little bit more. I still have I still have to go back and look at everything, but I know from my last calculation, and I haven't seen any new charges for anything related to flooding. Um, they took care of all that. So that was again around $2,000. And the same as with a like yourself, you want to have an emergency fund because right now you'll think of like, oh wow, that's what the risk with real estate investing, that something may happen or whatever. But when you are doing your calculations, when I go out to look at a property that I am thinking about investing, when I am making that decision on whether I'm going to buy it, I include that. I include about 5 to 10% for emergencies in the cash flow. So when I look at all the expenses after paying the mortgage on the property and also the property manager and other basic expenses, I also take away things for emergencies like having to replace the water heater. I've had to do that about a year ago, and now with the flooding, so I have an emergency fund for that, and then whatever's left over is my cash flow, the money that I keep. And so I count for that, and I make sure that when I'm looking at these properties that I have enough cash flow to cover all of that and also have some left over for me that makes it worth it to invest in that property. So those are things to think of when you are investing in real estate, is to make sure that you're going to have enough funds to create an emergency fund for each property. And and then that builds over time. Like, you want, when you buy your property, that's the first thing you want to do. Like, you're not going to go out there and pay yourself first. You're going to pay your emergency fund and your maintenance fund, all that first. And then when you get a few months worth of that, then yeah, you start keeping the money or whatever. That's what I do first. Some people like to kind of like do half seas, where they do enjoy some of the money, and then in at the same time build up their emergency fund or whatever. But I just put everything to the side and I reinvest everything. But that is another way that I had to use an emergency fund. Now, the last way that I used my emergency fund was pretty sad, because I had to say goodbye to a beloved pet. I had a black German Shepherd that I got back in 2013. I got him as a puppy, and he was with me throughout my whole military career. And, I had got him because I was by myself. I was in Virginia. I had just bought my first house, and I was, young and single and sola. Like, I was, wanted some companionship and everything. So I got him, and he, kept me company, went on hikes and everything, and went to the park. And he was just like my best friend, and went with me everywhere. Like, if somebody invited me to like a cookout or whatever, I always asked if I could bring my dog, because he was pretty well behaved. I took the time to train him and get a trainer and all that, because if you've never had a German Shepherd before, man, the first 2 years are rough. But once you get past those um 2 years and you train them, like, they are the best dogs and everything. So when we got over here, well, actually in California, I started noticing that he was like slowing down, right? It was over the summer right before we moved, and I started noticing that he was like starting to slow down. He was definitely more clumsy, and I'm thinking, oh great, hip dysplasia, right? And but we were in the middle, like, of all these big major life events, and we had to move, we and all that. So then we got over here, and he was still okay, and then we had him in the RV. But I noticed, well, not noticed, he had a few accidents. Like, we got a ramp for him, to try to make it easier for him to get up on the RV. Because if you've never been in an RV, it's pretty high, and it has steps and everything. But again, he had hip issues already. He was starting to have hip issues, so it was hard for him. So we had to help him up, and he fell a few times, and even that freaking ramp that we got for him just kind of like still didn't help. And matter of fact, it ended up burnt. He ended up getting rug burn on his paw, trying to get up there and everything. So after that, and he fell a few times, I was like, you know what, let's just go drop him off at my parents, because they have a yard, and it'll be easier for him. He doesn't have to try to get up and down these big Harvey steps. And so yeah, he was fine. We would come back and forth, right, to visit my parents, and then visit him as well, and he was okay. But then last weekend, not this past weekend, but the first, I guess, ends up being the first weekend of September, I forget. We moved the RV to the land, and then we made our way over here to my parents. And then that freaking same well next morning, I noticed him outside. We let him out to potty, and then I looked outside the window, and he was just laying down, and he looked like he was in pain. And I got worried, because I thought maybe it was bloat, when dogs drink, because he does drink water pretty fast and a lot. I thought he had like something where, like, his stomach, say, the iron, sometimes it twists or whatever. So we took him to the vet, and no podía caminar or whatever. He was like hurting and all that, and I felt so bad moving him. And so we went over there, and the x-rays, they took x-rays and they saw him and everything. And that was like, in total, that vet visit was like 350, I believe, around there, or was it 450? I forget, because my husband is the one that, has the stuff on his credit card. We use the credit card to get the points, and then we move the funds, but he hasn't moved the funds yet that I saw. But it was around that amount, and they told me that he had like a slip disc. But the vet told me like, oh yeah, we just give him like some steroids and just some rest and blah blah blah, and just help him to go potty or whatever, and just give him a couple weeks, and hopefully he'll get back up and get to walking around there. But like I said, he had already was starting to really struggle with walking already, and I brought him back. I think it was a little just because I didn't want to let him go at that time or whatever. Hindsight, I'm like, dang, I should have just like put him down there at that time. But with the vet, she told me that like, no, he's definitely like uncomfortable. Of course, he's gonna be in pain because it's the muscles, and he has a slip disc, but um, with some time, he should be able to recover as long as it doesn't get worse, right? And so we had him, and it was so hard. We had to get a harness and lift him and everything, and he was just not having a good time. So finally, this past Saturday, I couldn't do it anymore. He just deteriorated so bad, like like he was just there, and he would cry and everything. And so I was like, no, we gotta go take him. So we took him, and had to put him down, and that was another, I think the vet to do that was like 190, and then another $90 for another company to come and get him to, like, dispose of his body through cremation. And then we ordered a little keepsake of his paw print and a little photo frame that goes along that. So that was like another $35. I was pretty bummed out because I had really thought that he was going to make it onto the land. I knew wasn't going to have him much longer because he was like, getting old and struggling with walking and all that stuff. But I really thought he would at least last of a little bit till maybe next year, halfway next year. We had planned to, do his little doggy area for him to potty and just to enjoy outside. And we had designed a ramp for the deck, which now we don't have to do that extra expense. But we had done all that. So yeah, I was pretty bummed out, and I'm just glad that because I had an emergency fund, going through this difficult time, it was really stressful and everything. I didn't have to stress. I didn't have to have this, the stress on top of, mourning my dog of 12, basically 12 years. Um, have to worry about, the expenses of everything, because that was all another almost $800, right? And um I'm just thankful that, I had this emergency fund. So it's things like that. Hopefully, you never want to have to use these funds for things like that, but having that option and that available made it so much better that I didn't have to, worry about like, oh, um, can I get like a keepsake or whatever of him or whatever. We chose not to get his cremated remains back because it's like I would have rather have buried him on the land, but obviously we're in Dallas and I wasn't gonna be able to, drive with him to San Antonio. Because I really thought, again, I had thought that he would be over there and just, live the rest of his days over there in the land, and I would just bury him in the land. But that didn't work out. But um, yeah, that was the last way I had to use my emergency fund. But yeah, I didn't mean to have that sad part be the last one. I probably should have like sandwiched it in. But it's just I didn't even think about it until now. I was like, oh wow, now now this episode's gonna end kind of, sad. But what next? Is just making sure that we replenish our emergency fund, right? Because we just spent you know what, two grand basically uh on these expenses, and I don't count uh the rental property as part of my personal emergency funds because that's my rental investing business, so that's separate. It's a whole separate LLC, so that's the emergency funds for that. But yeah, so now our focus is going to replenish those funds, because again, you don't know when something might happen. I don't know if I'm going to have to, if we're going to have to replace the truck's, tires now. I mean, you don't know. So always remember that once you use those funds and you get through whatever emergency you have, to always remember to go back and replenish those funds. And don't feel guilty about it. I know, let's say you have like $5,000 the in your fund. A veces you'll, after, for example, me just spent $2,000, then you feel guilty that you had to use it. Like, no, that's what that money is there for. You already have to go through the struggle and the stress of dealing with an emergency. You don't want to have the guilt on top of that. That's what that money is there for. It's supposed to be used and guilt free. And just always want to make sure that you replenish it, and then so that way you have it ready for the next emergency that may come up. But other than that, hopefully y'all had a great few months. I forget when I uploaded an episode. I've just been dealing with a lot, as you can see, with all the emergencies that I had. Just a lot of life events, and it's kind of like, that's not necessarily a struggle, but it's definitely something to get used to now, being with my parents. I love being here, but it's definitely um kind of have to create a new routine of when I'm, going to be recording podcasts and, taking care of my daughter and other projects that I'm working on. But I am kind of pulling back with, Money Cheeseman teaching real estate investing, but I'm still going to be doing the Money Cheeseman podcast, but I do have something else. So if you haven't been following me on Instagram, definitely go follow me there, because I am kind of putting a few kind of sneak peeks on what I am working on. And definitely, if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, um, definitely sign up for that. Se me fue la onda. But yeah, I'm going to link that down below. But other than that, I'm going to stop rambling. I will see y'all in the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and share this episode so others can also find this podcast. Don't forget to follow me on all my social medias listed in the show notes below, where you can also find resources to help you in your financial journey. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the podcast, you can find that information in the show notes. Other than that, thank you so much for your support, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.